Okay, so hi, I am with Rena Cohen. Rena Cohen is a good friend who I've never met. Many of such friends that I've virtually met in the last year as we've gotten into this whole virus and vaccine situation. Rena, why don't we start by just telling everybody a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. Nice to see you, Hananya. I'm originally from Western Canada, from Calgary, Alberta, where I was born. My mother was one of the first Jewish girls born in Calgary in 1913. So I had a really great life growing up and getting married and having four children. And I made Aliyah just by myself when everybody was grown up. I like to say that my kids grew up and left home, and I grew up and came home.
Okay.
And I've been in Israel, it's going to be 30 years, which is almost impossible to believe.
Wow, that's amazing. So, what's your background in terms of this vaccine situation, the virus, all the issues related to that? When did you first realize that this was an issue beyond what the mainstream media was telling us?
Well, to be honest, before I left Canada and made Aliyah, I used to sell products to health food stores, but I was never really that much of a health food nut. I used to point out to people that it was interesting that people came to health food stores to buy products that said parva on them because they really didn't know that things were kosher and that we list all of our ingredients, right? So that people know clearly whether they can or they cannot eat something specific. So early on, I have been very suspicious of the flu vaccines. I've been very suspicious of, I don't know, a lot of things that have been happening in our world. I think one of the most difficult things that the world has provided for senior citizens, which I am, must admit, I am now 80. Oh, Hashem, and it's an amazing life. One of the things that Hashem blessed us with is technology that allows senior citizens who have retired and want to spend some time doing something productive. Well, we spend time in front of our computers and we search the internet for interesting subjects. And very early on, I don't know, I started hearing and seeing and reading things that left me questioning that why it was that people who had medical knowledge or who had a scientific knowledge, every time they posted something on YouTube or developed a website or did something positive, it was gone. It didn't last. It was taken down. And that led me to be very suspicious. I have a background somewhat also in the media, and I know that I had an argument with people at Canadian CBC many years ago because they accused me of being one-sided in the way I view things because of my Jewishness. And my comment to her was, I was brought up in Canada. I had a wonderful education in public school system. In those days, it was better than it is today. But it taught me to weigh things. It taught me to search out values, to not just accept things blindly, that I had to question. And even in my Jewish education, the rabbis always told me, you have to question because if you don't question, then you don't know why you're doing something. So this, unfortunately, has become part of my nature to question things on a level that I have because I'm not a scientific person and I'm not a doctor, but I have to find people who say things in a way that I can understand. And I think from the very beginning, with some of the people that I was hearing who struck me as very honest and forthright and willing to share the benefit of their knowledge and their understanding, there was no choice. We had to accept there was something wrong. Something wrong with the virus, something wrong with the pandemic, and something wrong with everything that was going on.
So let me ask you a question. We're living, unfortunately, in a culture where people are being taught and told just the opposite, not to question, just to blindly follow either experts or rabbis or people in the media. So those of us who actually do want to think for ourselves and do value thinking and questioning and researching on our own, what guidance can you give us in figuring out who we should trust and on what basis we should trust? We are bombarded with information from all sides.
Hananya, you're a rabbi, and I'm not that. I'm try to make myself knowledgeable, but I'm not as knowledgeable as I would like to be or as I should be. But it seems to me that Hashem has given us perfect direction to follow His lead and to follow His rules and to follow His regulations. And it's only when we do that that we will be successful in no matter what area it is that we do. We have rules for weights and measures. We have rules for studying Torah. We have rules for making blessings. We have rules for everything. Are we following them? Are we living a life according to what the spiritual role of the Jew is supposed to be? And if we aren't, then maybe that's part of our problem.
So let me ask you then, if we were following the rules, so how would they guide us in terms of dealing with the vaccine, the masks, all of the rules, all of the restrictions, and all of the information that is being thrown our way?
I think we have to go to, pardon me, I think we have to go to people we respect for those of us who are not sufficiently knowledgeable. But when I see a person like Dr. Zelenko, for example, who is a chassid, I think he's a Chabad if I'm not mistaken, when he comes out and says that he is a medical practitioner and he is trying to get to the Israeli government and nobody will talk to him because he has a way with his knowledge and with products that he has used to help people take care of themselves when there is a pandemic, or a plandemic, as we like to say. So he is one of the people who I trust because he obviously goes by Hashem's teachings. He obviously has the care of his patients at heart. And as a compassionate person, I find that it's easier to follow him than our leaders who are leading us down a garden path that has no flowers at the end of it.
Right. Our leaders are godless people. They've proven that over and over again, and they haven't even demonstrated any interest in seeing if there are alternative ways of dealing with the illness than just the vaccine and the lockdowns and the masks. They don't even seem to be curious about other options, which is very strange.
Which is one of the reasons why I don't follow our leaders and don't play the game of follow the leader. But one of the things that I found very, very interesting was that if our leadership, and we have elections, as you know, coming up on the 23rd of the month, how can anyone re-elect any of the people who are currently in the government when the government as a whole, not individual people, they've all gone along with this mass vaccination, which of course we know it's not a vaccination, right, because it doesn't prevent you from getting it, it doesn't prevent you from giving, and it doesn't do anything except ruin a person's immune system, which is the whole idea, that they do not want us to be healthy. And so there's absolutely no reason to follow any of these people or to re-elect them into a Knesset that is supposed to have the good of the people at heart, which they obviously don't.
Right, I agree. I find it very startling that in the more than 70 years that the modern state of Israel has been here, the people in the government come from a wide range of factions and really covering the gamut of our society, and they never seem to agree on anything, and they hate each other. And yet, for the first time in Israel's history, everybody in the government all seems to agree on one thing, and that is that we don't have basic human rights. They have the right to lock us down, force us to wear masks, force us to get injected with who knows what, anytime they feel like it. This is the only thing that they all agree with. Right wing, left wing, Jewish, non-Jewish, Arab, it doesn't make any difference. They're all on the same page on this one issue. It's very, very strange.
Which I think is one of the reasons that I seem to really gravitate to the feeling that if I honestly and truly believe that Hashem runs the world, which I do, because I wasn't brought up in an observant family. I wasn't brought up to really be an observant person. And my mother, of blessed memory, once asked me why it was that I moved to Israel. When I moved to Israel, I became observantly Jewish. Because I'd been here at the age of 19 on a student summer trip, and I vowed I would never live in Israel. When I look back now, I think I was like one of the 40 spies, who resulted in the Am Yisrael living in the desert for 40 years. I'd had to live in Canada for another 30 before I made Aliyah. But I look back and I see, hindsight is really 2020, and it's awesome where it takes us and how it makes us evaluate and reevaluate and look at the way things are and the way things should be and the way we wish things were. I live in Sfat up in the northern part of Israel, and there is a Hebrew word which is sofeh, which is sometimes used to describe, I think, a place that's up high, but sometimes it's also used to denote that someone is a seer, more of a prophet. Well, I certainly don't claim any of that right, but living in Sfat up high in the mountains and looking down on the country gives you a different perspective, and it makes you realize that people are not thinking, people are not analyzing who we are and where we are. I am constantly amazed that after 2,000 years in the wilderness and living in other parts of the world, and Hashem did scatter us to everywhere, we are, for the very first time, I just feel so blessed to be living here, because for 2,000 years, people have wanted to come to live in Israel. And look what we're doing to ourselves. I mean, I think it was one of the Arab leaders who once said, just leave the Jews alone for 70 years and they're going to destroy themselves, so we won't have anything to worry about. Well, it looks like we're doing it. But to go back what I was saying before, if I truly believe that God runs the world, which I do, I believe that there's a reason that he does everything, and we don't know. And this is one thing also that bothers me, is the number of people, rabbis and people who are educated but not necessarily qualified to be rabbis. Everybody is a prophet. Everybody knows exactly what Hashem's thinking is. I just rely on him to do the best possible thing, and if this is what he feels is necessary to do at this particular time, he must have a very good reason. Mm. And I don't necessarily, I mean, I can intuit, well, maybe he doesn't like this, and maybe he doesn't like that people are doing this or that or something else, but still and all, this is his world. Our Torah begins with that Hashem created the world and he gave it to the people to look, to the people who he wanted to look after it, which is why the Jewish people are in the land of Israel. Well, what are we doing with it, guys? What are we doing with it? And what are we doing to the people?
So the average person who has their concerns about the vaccines and all that's going on, what would be your sage advice to those people? I mean, one of the things that's kind of been absent from all the arguing about the situation is people are not turning to their elders, people who have a longer view of history. People are not turning to them. They think that they just know what science is saying and whatever the rabbis and the propagandists are saying, but they're not turning to their older, wiser, people. So what would be your sage advice for people now?
One of the things I think we have to do is we have to heal ourselves spiritually. I think we really have to go back and start learning Torah on a regular basis and really have a good understanding of what Hashem wants from me. Not from us as a whole, but what does he want from me, and what am I supposed to be doing, and how should prayer, or how should all the things that apply to us be useful to us today? We're going through some really tough times, and people are really depressed. I mean, this is why they're running to get the shots to begin with, because I don't know if they really do have faith in Hashem, in the fact that he does what is the best for each and every one of us in each and all times. But the other thing is, and this is another thing that made me suspicious, I have been taking vitamin C and vitamin D for years. And I also recently added zinc to my vitamin intake. And I also heard from Dr. Zelenko that HCQ was also very, very good for the system in days of the virus. And what I find so interesting is that any doctor who has recommended either ivermectin or HCQ or any of the other, and there are dozens of other things that people can take as for prevention, why are we not taking those? And somebody recently sent me, or I found somewhere, that India is currently giving out a package to its citizens that has vitamin C and zinc and a couple of other things in it. And it only costs $2.95 and it lasts for, I don't know, it looked like it was a week, maybe a 2 week supply. So why isn't our government doing this?
Right.
You know, why are they? Well, we know, of course, if you follow the money, there is no money in it.
Right.
And none of the people who currently get kickbacks from the vaccine from vaccine sales are getting royalties from little things like this. So of course it's not in their interest to promote anything like this. There has to be some deep psychological evil in the world at this particular time that is causing people to sell their souls for the dollar. I mean, it just, and we see it every day. I mean, you look at what's going on with the government and the amount of corruption and the amount of just everything negative that's going on. I mean, maybe Hashem said he's not going to use another flood. Well, maybe he has other ways of, trying to weed out the wheat from the chaff. It's really hard to know. It's really hard to say. But bottom line is, trust Hashem, get back into your spirituality, take your vitamins and minerals, find like-minded people. That's becoming the hardest part of all, is to try and find people who share the way you feel, because I know I have a lot of friends and a lot of people that I am friendly and acquainted with, but I can't tell you how many of them have now weakened to get and gotten the shot, mainly because they want that green pass. Either they want to travel, or they want to work, or they want to do some specific thing that they are not being allowed to do. And without getting that shot and getting that green pass, they're not going to be able to do it. And it's very frightening, the pressure that the government and the media the media only does what the government tells them to do. I think pretty much in any community. This same interview that I referred to earlier that I did with CBC Canada, I did after my trip to South Lebanon during the war in '82, or just after the war in '82. And there was a journalist from CBC who had been in Beirut during the war, and he was broadcasting on Canadian television. And they did an interview between the two of us, and I said to him, I said, Terry, you were in Beirut. Where did you get your information? He said, I got it all from the PLO. I said, really? He said, yeah. He said, they didn't let me out of my hotel, and every day they would bring me the information that they wanted me to put on television. So I said, well, what happened to the history? What about the history of Lebanon? What about the people of Lebanon? He said, nah, we only have 22 minutes to provide the news. And that really doesn't grab viewers. And the reason we need viewers and sensational material is so that we get advertisers. And the advertisers are the ones who pay the bills. So that's, those are the people we're trying to please. And it doesn't matter so much. And this is 1982.
Right.
So I was out there before President Trump calling out the fake news.
Well, look, if the same thing happened today, then once something got published in the media, and then if another person challenged it, they would say, well, it's already been published in the media. The fact checkers would say, well, here's a newspaper article that counters what you say, and therefore you are spreading fake news or misinformation because of the media article. But the media article is based on a biased source.
Exactly, but it has to be that way, because who is it who pays for the media? I checked in one day recently to see what was going on American television. Every second advertisement has Big Pharma all over it, and I mean you can't watch for 10 minutes without seeing ads for vaccines or for this pill or for that antibiotic or for this illness and this and so it makes you wonder. Is this why we're being virus to life? I mean, I think one thing this virus is doing is it's making us. We have a saying in Judaism that says choose life, right? So are we going to choose life, or are we going to go for the alternative, which is to be on medication for the rest of our lives and just give all of our money over to and care over to people who really don't care about us?
Let me ask you one final question. Many people, myself included, have made comparisons to the Holocaust, or at least what happened pre-final solution. And some people have a reflex or an instinct to be very offended by that and say that, first of all, either it's not a valid comparison or we are insulting the people who suffered during the Holocaust by making these comparisons. And they don't want to think any deeper and say, well, is this comparison really valid, even if it's not exactly the same, but is it similar enough that there's something there for us to learn from? So what would be your answer to those people who challenge our right to even make any comparisons to the Holocaust?
Oh, that's a heavy question. You know, it's interesting. I have friends who don't live in Israel, some of whom who have lived in Israel in the past, and they're actually happy that they don't live here now because they still, in the countries that they live in, have some freedom of choice. And these are Jewish people who say that the Israeli government right now is using Nazi characteristics in order to control the Jewish people. And it makes you wonder. You know, it's interesting that I've read, now my statistics might be wrong, but the heads of some of the chemical companies, the big pharma companies, are some of them not Jewish? And yet they themselves, who have lost family during the Holocaust, members of our government have lost family during the Holocaust, they certainly cannot be ignorant of the comparison that is possible. I have a very favorite radio station in Boston that I listen to, and Jeff Kuhner, who is the host for 4 hours every morning, his family was from Croatia, and his grandfather was in a concentration camp, and he likens it, what's going on now in America and around the world, to the 1930s, that we're seeing it all come alive. And that for those of us who don't understand how the people were and what they were challenged with and how society was re-educated primarily, we're doomed to repeat it. You know, people who don't study their history and repeat the past, what can we do? You know, and you can't, I know I'm guilty of this as well, that sometimes people are bringing up the Holocaust and we immediately think that they're anti-Semites, or we think that they're against the Jewish people. But I think sometimes they're just trying to wake us up and say, you know, why are you willing to live under leadership that treats you as if you were vermin, or treats you as if you have no value, or is doing what they're doing to you? I mean, it's quite appalling. And I have to look around me and I have to say, yeah, none of these 120 members of the Knesset should be reelected. I know that you're active, and I have been doing my little bit to promote Rapeh, which is the new political party in Israel.
Yes.
For people who are wanting freedom of choice. And I was horrified to learn that Dr. Avni, who was the head of the party, had his medical license stripped by the government, mainly because he's the head of a party that says freedom of choice. Yes.
Right.
I mean, you know, like, what more do we have to look at? I mean, it just, you know, it's something. And unless people are aware, and unfortunately too many people are captured by reality TV and all of the big media buffs and so on and so forth, people don't pay attention. And it's really sad. And it says a lot about what's going on in our world and how people are or are not functioning on the top level. I mean, you've got to be aware. You have to know what's going on. And it doesn't take a lot of time or a lot of energy, but too many people have just abdicated all responsibility to spend time looking and searching and trying to see what's right in front of us.
So let's end this on a positive note, because we do have faith in Hashem that things will ultimately work out for the best, and that there's a very happy ending to this story, even though we're living in very dark times. What would you suggest people do, A, to get through these difficult times, those of us who already see all the darkness and all the problems and all the lies, but we feel either isolated or powerless to do much about it? How can we get through this? And second of all, how can we possibly reach other people who seem to be zombies, just not paying attention to the truth, not willing to listen to us, not willing to see what's staring them in the face? Is there any way that we could possibly reach these people?
that's probably the $64,000 question that if most of us had the answer to that, we would really know what to do. I think the only way any of us can really weather any of this is, first of all, to get in touch with our spiritual side, because that is really the only way that we can weather anything. You know, I was diagnosed with breast cancer many years ago, and when the doctor came in and told me, I also have edited books in my past life, and when one of them really connected me with Hashem on a very deep level. And when the doctor came in and told me that I had been diagnosed with breast cancer, my reply to her was, "Oh, Baruch Hashem, thank God. What are we going to do? I'm glad to know what I have, but now what are we going to do about it?" And my doctor told me that I was one of his miracle cases because at that point I was stage 3. And he once asked me, I was on chemo for 2 years, and during the first year he asked me, I was in the treatment room and just finishing my treatment, and he asked me, he said, "You know, we've got 20 some doctors here that are from North America. They were touring Sheraton Hospital in Jerusalem. And he said, I want you to come and talk to them." I said, "You want me to come and talk to them? What do you want me to talk to them about?" He says, "I don't care what you're talking about. I want you to talk to them." I said, "All right." So I went into the room, and of course, first I asked if there were any Canadians amongst them, because I like to put us, on an even playing field. But then I said to them, I said, "You have to know with your patients if they have a belief in a higher power. You have to ask them. Because without a belief in God or in whatever they see as a supreme being, if they don't have that, it ain't going to work." Now, none of them have ever contacted me to tell me whether my theory was correct or not. But without a belief in Hashem, without a belief, and doesn't matter what religion you are, we're all in this together. So everybody has to go back and find out, I was born to be Jewish in this lifetime, so I need to find out what my role is. What is my piece of the puzzle? Because each of us has a piece of the puzzle. And you've got to find out what your piece of the puzzle is, and then you have to figure out where you have to put it. But it's awesome that people don't go there. They're not, and yet they're running off. A lot of them are doing all kinds of different meditation and doing this and that and the other thing. Get in touch with who you were born to be. And that to me is I think the only way that any of us are going to get through this and get through this with a positive outlook that there is going to be light at the end of the tunnel. It's always dark when you're going through difficult times. But if you can connect with your inner self, in Jewish we call it the Pintel Yid, and I'm sure that which is the inner core of the Jewish person. If anybody, whether you're Christian, whether you're Muslim, no matter whether you're a New Ager, it doesn't matter what you are, but you've got to connect with that inner spark, and you've got to go back to your roots, and you've got to figure out what your role is and how you are supposed to illustrate that in order to get people on the right path. And one of the things that we have, and I think it's probably one of the things that made me become observantly Jewish, is that we have to be happy all the time. The Hebrew phrase is "liot b'simcha tamid." And if we're not happy all the time, we're missing out. And even in the darkness, you've got to be happy, because you have to know that God is in charge, that all is right with the world, because things are going along the way He might want them to. Might not be the way we want them to. But what can we do to help Him change His opinion so that everything will work out for the best for everybody? And I think that's what we all have to be working on. Simple. Simple's always the best.
Oh, that's
KISS principle.
Thank you, Rena Cohen. That's a very beautiful message. Thank you for taking the time to share from your experience and wisdom and positivity and hope. And it's something a lot of people need right now. And I hope that we'll be able to wake up and inspire and educate a few more people along the way.
Amen. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Okay.